Hi friends, my name is Jake. Welcome back to Canadian Cutting Edge, and yes, we've got another CJRB knife for you today. This is the LAGO, model number J1926. Not quite 3.5 inches in the blade, and it's a button lock. We've got a flipper, we've got a hole in it for deployment, we've got a decent handle. I really like how the grip feels on this. It's a decent knife. AR-RPM 9 steel, like they commonly love to use. Their proprietary steel, or the steel they had developed for their knives. You want to see the review for this. In a nutshell, I think you're going to like it. I really think you're going to like this review. Disclaimer, I got this knife given to me by CJRB, and I had to look it up to remember that. That was after I'd done all my notes and everything. I, was thinking it was nagging in the back of my head, did I buy this or was it given to me? That's how much I really don't pay much attention to where I get my knives to decide on my opinions on them. But still, some of you will, it's appropriate for me to tell you that I got it given to me, although I don't think it's really affected my review. But everything's subjective in this world. There's not everything, there's very little that's objective. And I'll tell you what I think of this thing. You want to come on down to the tabletop with me and take a good look at it? I want to share close-ups, tear down, everything that you want to know about this knife should be included in this video. There's only one way to find out. Stick around and watch it. Clearly you can see I've got the black on black version. You can also get black with a satin blade. You can get red with black. You can get red with a satin blade, or you can get tan with a satin blade. Those are the 5 different standard ways that the knife comes. I'm sure there's some exclusives out somewhere. It looks pretty nice. This is a PVD coating, not black washed at all, so just like that. And satin, I think I prefer the satin blade. I really don't like coated blades, but in my testing, there haven't been any scratches produced on here. There's some markings, oils from my skin and stuff, and I've tried to wipe it off, and so no, there's no really, I didn't find any defects on the coating here at all, even though it's a personal preference. I don't like coated blades. A black wash blade, that gets close to being okay. I really love stonewash, but satin finish is pretty good too. What do we got? Well, CJRB is calling this a drop point blade, and that's exactly what I was going to call it. I was wondering if they were going to call this like a Warncliffe or something, but no, they call it a drop point blade, so hopefully everyone else making videos agrees. We've got a little bit of a swedge up here, and that's an oddity to me. It's a little bit of a con to me, actually. It's not a full flat grind. It's a very high flat grind. The grind goes up to right about here. There's a line, and it intersects this hole, and then it's flat back here because the plunge ends here and it's flat. So yeah, there is a flat section here for you to clamp onto if you've got a guided sharpening system. So that's nice, but it's a very high flat grind. Bit of a belly all the way along. We've got a finger choil here, so if this plunge is nice and slow, that doesn't really matter at all. The finger choil I wish was a little bit bigger, or I wish they would have taken this line back a little bit. They could have left the flipper side the way it is. How the flipper is like this. I'll just show you a still picture of it. If a little bit of this bump back here was taken away, then there'd be a little bit more room for a finger to be very safe here. I'd like it to be like this. See the space I've got right here? I'd like that to always be there. But if you just pick up the knife and grab it, it tends to be like this. Now, hopefully if we can get this to focus right in this area, my finger is, some of the skin, and I don't have fat hands. I've got, fairly thin hands. My hands are just barely in the extra large range, and there's not as much room there as I'd like to be. There should be more room. I just have to consciously keep my finger back a little bit. Not a big con at all. It's just a little thing. A lot of people have smaller hands than I have, and then this finger choil is plenty big enough. Just be careful in that area if you've got big fingers. The sharpening on this, yeah, it's done okay. They've done it very sharp, but the grind angles aren't awesome, but the grind angles are pretty good. I was going to say quite good and pretty good at the same time. Yeah, and then get my merds mixed up a little bit. Anyhow, the other thing on this blade is the badging. Right there is the model number, and then the steel AR-RPM 9. It's on the main bevel, which I don't prefer, but at least it's quite small. And on this side, the CJRB's on the bevel as well. At least it's not huge. And that's all you've got for badging. We've got a nice big hole in here, and that hole is certainly usable, to flick the blade open using the hole, no problem at all. And the button is right here to, close the knife, and that's good. And of course I showed you the flipper, but there's the action of the flipper. Works really well. One more thing that's a minor con for me, we've got some jimping up here. It's like a thumb riser, and then it sort of levels out and slowly comes down. There's, 5 lines milled in, or is it 6? There's 6. There's 6 lines milled in there with the bumps. I really wish it went up higher. And as I said earlier, this swedge here, I don't like it because it makes the spine of the blade even more narrow than it needs to be. So when you do use the forward choil and you put your thumb up here, not only do you get no jimping, you've got a thinner edge for the pressure of your thumb to go onto. It's not bad. It just gets a little bit annoying if you're doing something like this for a long period of time, cutting with your thumb on here, and see the focus. You can see the mark on my thumb already just from 15-20 seconds of doing this, and it's just not that great. I don't like having a lot of pressure on there without having grip, especially. So there's a couple minor cons right there, but overall the blade shape is very useful. It's okay for piercing. It's quite good for slicing and cutting. And the steel, I really like ARPM9. So that's the blade part of it. The handle, we've got flat slab G10 with the G10 texture on here. The texture is quite good. All the edges are rounded all the way around. We've got an extra swedge here on both sides for your index finger to be comfortable. And it's done quite well on there. It's just that it's got a crisp edge right there. Yeah, if I was keeping this knife, I'd sand that just a little bit to round it off a little bit, to make it more like the rest. It's not a hot spot really at all. It's a very, very minor concern of mine. It's just fine. There's a bit of a cutaway back here, so it's very easy to get your thumb in here and just use the edge of your thumb to push the button down. Oh, close the blade if you don't hit your table, and then throw the thing away. There you go. Using just, the edge of my thumb right there, going to close it, going to open it, works just fine. Don't have to push the middle of your thumb on there. And that extra cutaway on the side there helps with that. And that cutaway is done in steps, which is kind of unique. We've got an accent right there with red, pivot collar on this side. Other than that, we've got a T8. We've got T8 button screws back here. If you're going to do button screws, this is the way I prefer them. They are not recessed in. Maybe on the close-up, if I can get it like this, you can see that these buttons are proud. So they stick it up outside of the G10, and they're not leaving a nice trench for junk to get in there. I've mentioned that several times, and that maybe somebody heard me, or maybe it just was a fluke that it came out this way, but that is the way I prefer them to be. Let's see how much play there is between the screwdriver and the screw head. Almost none. You can just see a little bit of a wiggle, on the driver right there. Same thing in the screw that's, even less movement in there on the pivot. And we've got holes there for the pocket clip to be on this side, but the other side here has got a not super common style pocket clip. The screws are beside each other, so it's nice and wide. It's not sticking over the end, so it's not a super deep carry, but we've got T6 flush screws, and let's take a look. Just a little bit of play in there, but not very deep, so do be careful if you're going to be tightening or loosening, like removing the pocket clip. Thankfully, you don't need to remove the pocket clip to take the knife apart, so you should only be touching those screws if you really need to take it fully apart, or if you're left-handed and you want to put it on the other side. There's a bit of an arch back here, but as you come to the back, it's all nicely rounded around. Big lanyard hole back through here, goes through both sides, quite nice. The standoffs, well, they're just shiny steel colored. So's the button. It's not a con, it's just a preference. If I was doing an all black on black if I was doing an all black on black knife, I would like to make it all black on black. You know, some kind of really durable anodization for the button, and I suspect that's why they didn't do this, because anodizations tend to rub off, and this is a high friction area, your thumb's commonly moving on it. So I do understand why on a budget knife this is silver. It's just I prefer all black. But these standoffs back here, those could be black. That's not a high friction area at all. Nothing rubs on there. So I'd like more of it to be black, but that's a very minor thing. It's a comfortable handle. The grip on it is quite good. It feels good in the hand. Reverse grip's quite good. A reverse pull grip is even more comfortable. The regular hammer grip, fairly comfortable knife in hand. I really like how well it feels. A couple other things. The balance point is quite nice. Could be a little bit more forward, but that would require more weight back here. And I'd actually like the whole knife to be just slightly lighter, but that's just fine. The other thing is the blade alignment. Let's see if I can get it focused right up here. There we go. It's very good. It's very well aligned right down the middle, just the way I like it. The pocket clip, I didn't show it going into a pocket, so let's do that. Let's show it going into a pocket. It climbs over. It's got just enough of an edge there, climbs over, goes to the full depth, and it looks good. Of course, the red's going to stand out more, you know, having some red back here, but that's just fine. You can also, like I said, get that tan version. It's a good looking knife. There is one tiny little flaw in the G10, just above this screw, right there on that edge. There's a little bit of a defect, but that's extremely minor, and it's pretty rare to see that kind of defect on a CJRB knife. I think this is the first time I've seen that. The reason I found it was by feel, not by vision. I didn't see that defect. I was just, like I do, I rub my hands around them when I'm evaluating a knife, and I felt a little bit right there. So that's a very minor thing. What's next? I got to take the thing apart, show you how it's constructed. There's how it's constructed. 3 holes in the liners to help lighten it up a little bit. And there's those standoffs. The standoff screws, they've got a little bit of Loctite residue on them. The pivot screw does not. And I did find that this pivot screw did come a little bit loose during use. Not much. At the end of my testing, you know, there was a tiny bit side-to-side blade play. Other than that, there wasn't any, and it's pretty easy to tighten it up a little bit. You know, I would probably put my VC3 to help hold it. Here is the ceramic ball bearings in the nylon cage, and let's take a look here. There is 4, 8, 10 ball bearings in here, which is quite good, better than average. Most knives like this, you know, have 9 or sometimes less. More ball bearings is better. We've got a D-shaped pivot pin right here. That keeps it from spinning around. That's a good thing. So construction's just fine. Nothing wrong with that. It's time now for the measurements. The weight of this knife, 128 grams, 4.51 ounces. I don't really find 4.5 ounces as a problem, especially for a knife of this size. Let's first do the sharpness. How sharp is it from the factory? Measured 3 times, and the average, like in 3 different places. Average score, 120 best. So that's sharper than most of the knives I review. So they did a decent job putting a very acute edge on this thing. I'll talk about the grind angles in just a second. First, the cutting edge length, 78.3 millimeters, 3.08 inches. Blade length, tip to the closest spot on the handle. That's 87.5 millimeters, 3.44 inches. The thickness of the blade stock to start with, so the thickest flat area back here, 2.63 millimeters, 0.1035 of an inch, so just a little bit over 1/10 of an inch thick. The blade depth this way, it's widest right here where my fingers are, 32.2 millimeters, 1.27 inches. How thick is it behind the grind? So it's easy to see on here where I mean it's where the black PVD coating ends, and you see the shiny edge. That is 0.53 millimeters thick this way. That's 20.5 thousandths thick. So it's a little little bit thicker than I prefer. Not a bad issue. And since it's got such a high grind, it's not going to get thick at a very quick rate, but it is a tiny bit thicker than I prefer. Grind angles, this side's got an average grind angle on this edge of 20.5 degrees. This side's got a grind angle of 22.9 degrees, so almost 23 degrees. Started at 23.3, ended at 22.5. That's 0.8 degrees of change, so that's fairly consistently sharp and better than most knives, quite a bit better than most knives. This side started at 21.7 degrees, ended at 19.3 degrees. That's 2.4 degrees of change, to give us that 20.5 average. So this steel with this kind of knife that's used for the kinds of things that ODYSEE would be, I'd probably sharpen this at 18 degrees per side. Back to the rest of the measurements. The handle length, that is 117.1 millimeters, 4.61 inches. The grip area with a big rounded edge here, I wasn't sure exactly where to measure it, so I measured it just inside the pocket clip to the flipper here. That's a guard when it's open. That's about 9 centimeters, about 3.5 inches. The thickness of the handle scales on the G10, not on like the screws or bumps or anything, 12.1 millimeters, 0.477, so just under a fifth of an inch, just under a half of an inch. The handle depth, that's this way, it's widest back here, 21.9 millimeters, which is 1.15 inches. And when it's closed, the widest point is not here, it's actually here, but it's pretty close to the same measurement at both places, 37.8 millimeters, 1.49 inches. And the total length of this thing is about 205 millimeters, 8.07 inches, so 8 inches. What's the price of this knife? Most stores in the United States are going to list this at $49.99. At White Mountain Knives, you can save 10% with coupon code CCE. That makes it $45, well, $44.99. That's about $60 Canadian. In Canada, it's about $65 at Blades Canada. That's Warriors and Wonders, which is the best place to get this if you're a Canadian. Go to Blades Canada. Unfortunately, I don't have a discount code for you there. If you're around the world, or even if you're in the United States and you want one of these knives and the one you want is sold out at White Mountain Knives or your other favorite store, you can always go to CJRB directly. That's artisancutlery.net. I've got a link down below. If you use my link, you save 5%. And that turns your $49.99 into, what is it, $47.49. What's my thoughts of this knife? I'm quite happy with it. Like I said, there's a few very minor cons. I'd like this finger choil here to come back a little bit further to give me, give a fat finger a little bit more room. And I'd like more jimping. Those are the main ones. Get rid of this swedge. I know it's a decorative thing and it kind of looks cool, but just get rid of that swedge. It'd be better that way, in my opinion, because you'd want it thicker. But it doesn't come very thin, so like I said, that's a very minor thing. And just like the other concerns, they're quite minor indeed. I think it's quite nice. That's quite nice. I'm fairly happy with it. And I really, really like how good the grip feels in the hand. That's a big deal to me. And this knife has got that, in spades. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you're a supporter of mine, again, I thank you very, very much for your support. If you want to support the channel, patreon.com/CCE, or click the join button down below, and you can become a regular supporter for as little as $2 US per month. And remember, friends, always cut towards your chum, not your thumb.